and welcome to the 14th Massey Family Lectureship. In addition to our audience here in the historic Montgomery Auditorium, which has been renovated in a magnificent way, as you can tell if you have not been here in a while, we want to welcome those who are joining us also on video streaming at our outreach locations. This is the first time we've ever done that, so we're pretty proud of it. And at the conclusion of the lecture, we will also have questions and answers. So I want to, before we continue, all of the work that goes into one of these events is like magic. And we had a lectureship committee who created magic because they are magical. And I want to really, really thank all of those who worked on the lectureship committee. And not only is this a great time for the Massey Family Lectureship, we're also so happy at this lectureship. We have our newly named Sean Burridge, the 20th president of Southeastern Oklahoma State University. And I just have to say this, even though it isn't in the script. He's our newly appointed and has been on campus since July 1st, but it seems as though he's been with us forever because he's just one of us, and everybody is so happy. And he also, as we know, some of these things we know because he was known statewide as an Oklahoma State Senator of District 2, and he did not seek a third term, and I like to think it's because he wanted to be here with us instead. He's an attorney by profession and has served in public service, higher education, have all the important roles in President Burridge's life. He earned his Juris Doctorate degree from the University of Oklahoma College of Law in 1993. In addition, he holds a bachelor's degree in accounting from the University of Oklahoma. He is a product of the Antlers Public Schools. He has recently been appointed to the Governor's Education Advisory Committee. And we stopped with the list of all of his honors and accomplishments there, because if we hadn't, we wouldn't have time for our guest lecture. So please welcome President Sean Burridge.
Thanks, Dean Skofus. Again, I want to welcome everyone to the Southeastern Oklahoma State University campus for the 14th Massey Family Endowed Lectureship. State Regent John Massey made the Massey Family Endowed Lectureship program at Southeastern possible with a gift in 1994, which was matched by the Oklahoma State Regents for Higher Education. Mr. Massey is the chairman of the board for First United Bank and Trust, headquartered here in Durant. He's vice chairman of the Oklahoma State Regents for Higher Education, and he earned a Bachelor's of Science degree from Southeastern in 1960. He's a former state representative and a former state senator like myself. In 1984, he received a Distinguished Alumnus Award from Southeastern, and in 2005, the School of Business here at Southeastern was renamed the John Massey School of Business. He's established 9 endowed chairs and 4 professorships here at Southeastern. He was inducted into the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, the Oklahoma Higher Education Hall of Fame, the Oklahoma City Community College Hall of Fame, and has received prestigious Leadership Oklahoma Lifetime Achievement Award. Obviously, I could go on and on about the list of more Regent Massey's accomplishments, but right now I want to just stop and say thank you, John Massey. Thank you, Regent Massey, for what you've done for Southeastern Oklahoma State University. Also here today, we have Greg Massey, John's son, who's the president and CEO of First United Bank, carrying on the Massey family tradition of giving back to the community. Greg is very involved with the community, Right now, he and I are engaged in a project called Imagine Durant, which we both truly believe will transform the city of Durant. I look forward to working with you on that, Greg, for many years. He's also was instrumental in bringing the Boys and Girls Club to Durant. He's a former OSU A&M Regent, having served in higher education. Would you please join me now in recognizing Regent Greg Massey and the other members of the Massey family who could be here today, and I'd ask them to stand. We have Regent Massey and his wife, Donna. We got Greg Massey, Brian Wandell, son, and Bernie Kendrick. Please. It is now my pleasure to introduce today's speaker. And his resume, we really could be here for an hour talking about it. But he and I became friends almost 20 years ago. In 1996, my wife Carol and I moved to Claremore, Oklahoma, to where I was going to practice law. We were going to establish our family. When we moved there, I bought a house, and my back fence neighbor was a guy named Keith Ballard, who was superintendent of Claremore Public Schools. We became fast friends. In fact, whenever I ran for the state senate, the first gathering that was ever had about me running was at a friend's house. Keith Ballard was there. I think he wrote me my second check to run for the state senate. So I really appreciate him. A little bit about Keith. He's been a superintendent at Oologah. He's been a superintendent at Claremore. He headed up the Oklahoma State School Board Association. He's a graduate of Fort Hays College, Northwestern, our rival, and also has a doctorate from OSU in education. Right now, though, he leads up Tulsa Public Schools. They have 41,000 students and 7,000 employees. To think about that, 41,000 students and 7,000 employees. That's bigger than OU or OSU right there in Tulsa. It is a tremendous job that he's taken on, and it's been amazing to watch him over the past 7 years. Since he has been at Tulsa Public Schools, they have passed almost $1 billion in bond projects. It's truly phenomenal to think of the way he's transformed that school system. So we'll have plenty of time for him to speak and plenty of time for us to ask questions. I want you to please join me in welcoming Dr. Keith Ballard as our Massey Family Lecturer for 2015.
Writing herd on 41,000 kids is not nearly as difficult as writing herd on my 3 grandkids. My daughter-in-law, Tracy, is right down here. Everybody hear me okay? Oh, I'm going to make that thing say. My daughter-in-law, Tracy Ballard, is right down here in front. Can't see her very well, but she's sitting by her old classmate from Medill, Kyle Stafford. So, Tracy, thank you for being here with me today. She came down and saw her mother in Medill yesterday and spent the night and then came down to hear her father-in-law speak today. Wow. I was so pleased to see the students come in. President Burridge, Senator Burridge, my dear friend Sean Burridge, I was so pleased to see the students come in. And it is such an honor to be the 14th speaker in the Distinguished Lecture Series. And I would have never thought it possible. And I'm not going to get deep into my background, but I think probably knowing a little bit about me is helpful to understand what we did in Tulsa. But I certainly was a first-generation college attendee. In fact, my father was a janitor in a little tiny school in Kiowa, Kansas, 31 kids in my graduating class. So you never know where you will end up. And this is such a deep honor, not only to be the 14th lecturer, but to be here with my dear friend, President Sean Burridge. And I can't say enough about the Massey family. I mean, I've known John Massey. I think probably it would be more accurate to say I've certainly known of him for several years. And then I have had the opportunity on a couple of occasions to meet him. But what a contribution they have made to Durant. What a contribution they have made to Southeastern. What a contribution they have made to this part of the state. What a contribution they have made to the state of Oklahoma. And to host an event like this in a university, which really ought to be the catalyst for intellectual activity and stimulation, really is very difficult to express my appreciation. Greg, to you, John, to you, and to your family. And I had the opportunity to meet, I believe it was Corbin last night. He may be the cream of the crop. That kid's got it going. So anyway, I'm thrilled to be in Durant. I will tell you that I live in Claremore. Even though I'm superintendent in Tulsa, I continue to live in Claremore, where I moved in 1992 when I became superintendent. There's a huge Claremore-Durant connection for me, and I can really relate to people who have been here and to the city. Tracy's husband, my son Matt, was recently elected district attorney in Rogers, Mays, and Craig County, and I had the opportunity to meet Emily Redmond. How impressive is she? Wow. I don't know if she's here today, but very impressive lady, and I know that she has really helped Matt in his adjusting to being a district attorney. Also, assistant district attorney out of this area, Matt Stubblefield, was my son's roommate in law school. And Stubblefield continues to come up to Claremore on July 4th, and have gotten to know him and his family. Then, of course, there's a college connection between Durant and Claremore. I still credit Joe Wiley with being the guy who turned Rogers State University around. And Joe Wiley came up from Durant and became a very dear friend of mine, and he also brought Larry and Joanne Minks with him, and Aaron Minks, who is my youngest son's best friend. If you know anything about Aaron Minks, I don't know if people out there know Aaron or not, but my son's traveled the world with Aaron, and in fact, my wife and I are leaving Friday to go to Sweden to visit our youngest son and his Swedish wife. Aaron Minks is also married to my Swedish daughter-in-law's best friend, because my son and daughter-in-law introduced Aaron to her, and I think they live in Laos or somewhere now. But I do have a deep connection with Durant. I was down here several times whenever I was with the Oklahoma State School Boards Association. William Ferendorf was just finishing his term as president of the Oklahoma State School Boards Association. Al White, who was from, and it's the most interesting thing, Al is a great guy. He worked here at Southeastern for years and became a very dear friend of mine, and I actually was down here a couple of times and did some board training at his school. But the interesting thing about his school, and Jarvis Dobbs, a good friend of mine as well, is that I didn't know until I came down to his school that it was spelled C-O-L-B-E-R-T. I always thought it was Cobbert, and I never heard the L in it until I came down and saw it, and I wondered if I was the right place, but I was. But I have enjoyed that connection. And let me, it's been a really interesting as I get into my lecture series, and I've already had a pretty good workout this morning. I thoroughly enjoyed the question and answer with the Executive Council, and I am absolutely going to leave time today for question and answer, because I think that's the best way to truly understand what has happened in Tulsa Public Schools. But I think you need to know just a little bit about my background. I really did not intend to go into teaching. I majored in psychology whenever I was in college, because that's what we did in the late 60s, was everybody was a psychology major. But I decided at the end of my college career that I was going to find a way to get into education, because I liked teaching, and so I picked up another major, and I actually majored in psychology and speech. Couldn't get a job teaching my first year, and then my wife and I stumbled onto a job in Coweta. And I worked there for a couple of years, and then we moved to Oologah. That's who Durant beat in, I think, the fall of 1979 to win the state championship that year. But I believe it was in the quarterfinals that we had that 3-0 football game. Stayed at Oologah for 18 years. Started out as a classroom teacher, then I was an administrator in every area of the district, and the last 6 I was superintendent. Finished my doctorate at that time, moved to Claremore, where I was superintendent for 8.5 years. Became very involved with the politics of education, was president of the Superintendent's Association, president of suburban schools, very active, and then when the position at the Oklahoma State School Boards Association came open, which every school in the state of Oklahoma belongs to, I took that position and I was officed out of Oklahoma City. And it was there where I learned a lot about politics, which is certainly very interesting today in the lack of support, I think, for education. But I learned a lot about politics, media presence, decided I finally wanted to realize my lifelong dream of being a university professor. Took a job at the University of Oklahoma on the Tulsa campus, and before I could get to that job, I was offered the job in Tulsa Public Schools. They'd gone through a very volatile time. My predecessor only stayed a couple of years. Actually paid him $400,000 to leave. You know, that always kind of intrigued me. If you don't do well, they pay you to leave. So I wanted to stay, and I don't think I would have taken money to leave, but that's what I inherited whenever I came to Tulsa Public Schools. A position I had never thought about and didn't think I would ever end up in, but certainly one of the most gratifying positions that I've ever been in. One day, before I became superintendent in Tulsa, one day, a group of motivational speakers were coming through Tulsa, and one of those speakers was General Colin Powell. He's one of my heroes. I've read his books. I have followed his career, coming from humble beginnings, going through ROTC programs to rise to the positions that he did. Interestingly, he made a call ahead of coming there, and he said, I want to see two people. Whenever I get there, I want to see the mayor of Tulsa, and I want to see the superintendent. Well, that was one day before my contract actually kicked in, but hey, this is Colin Powell, that's close enough, and the other guy was gone anyway. So I showed up backstage whenever Colin Powell appeared, and he actually visited with the mayor for a few minutes, and then he turned to me and he crooked his finger and he said, come with me. He walked to a far corner of the backstage area where nobody could hear us, and he leaned in so close to me that he put his hand on my chest. I will never forget that moment. And he said, Mr. Superintendent, you have one of the most important jobs in America. I hope you understand that. Because, Mr. Superintendent, if you don't win the urban setting, if we don't win the urban setting in 50 to 60 of our largest schools in America, I promise you we will lose America. I will never forget that moment. I had trouble breathing. I'm usually not a nervous person, but this was General Colin Powell who was telling me that, and I have taken those words to heart, and I have done what I can to try and transform Tulsa Public Schools. So let's talk about basically the last 6 or 7 years and what it's been like and the influences on me as I have been a part of the team that has worked diligently to transform, to reform that urban setting. I will say when I got there, and I'm retiring in 2 months, by the way. I don't know if anybody knows that, but I'm retiring in 2 months. So it's really kind of open season on me talking about what it was like whenever I got there. Because I generally think it's bad form to say, oh, it was terrible and I fixed it. And that's not what this is about. But I'm telling you, we had a lot of problems. Sitting right here in the audience today is a gentleman who was working in Tulsa Public Schools at that time. He's right here on the front row. His name is Todd Lee. He works for the bank here in Durant. He was one of the bright spots in Tulsa Public when I got there, and there were some bright spots. He's very intelligent. He was our chief information officer. So we had some great folks like Todd Lee who were there and who I could look to for help, and especially in the early days, the things that we did to improve our technology program. But not all of them were Todd Lee's whenever I got there. And I think if I could say one thing about Tulsa Public whenever I arrived was I was amazed about the intolerance for ineffective teaching. Because you see, when I was at Oologah, we had 100 teachers. Obviously, I knew every single teacher. I had taught there. I had been an assistant principal there. I'd worked for 9 years in administration. I knew all of the principals. I knew all of the teachers. And I will assure you that Oologah's greatness speaks directly to the fact that we always had an effective teacher in every single classroom. Then I moved to Claremore. We had 250 teachers in Claremore. I knew all of their names before I got there. I memorized them. I knew what they taught. I knew who they were. And over time, we ensured that we had effective teachers in every classroom. My oldest son, Tracy's husband, National Merit Scholar, coming out of a class that had 5 National Merit Scholars in it. My other two children, graduates of Claremore High School, excellent teachers. But when I got to TPS, I could see that that was really what the big problem was, in addition to a number of other issues. So I initially struggled with how do you solve this? What can we do? And then I could not tell this story of the journey through Tulsa Public Schools if I didn't talk about the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is basically focused on two areas. They do a lot of work in a lot of areas, but their main primary focus is on world health, focusing on hunger, clean water, sanitary facilities, all of those kinds of things, and the other is education in America. And they had dabbled in a number of ways in issues in education in America. And finally they said, are we really making a difference? We're not sure. They took a year off and they didn't provide any philanthropic support for any school in America. Instead, they did a year of intensive research. And what their research showed them was the absolute most effective component in the education process is an effective teacher in every classroom. And then they decided they were going to pick 10 schools in America, and they were going to prove that they could reform, particularly urban settings is what they were looking for. They started with more than 10,000 schools in their quest to find 10 schools where they could make a difference. And they narrowed it down. I didn't even know this was going on, and narrowed it down, and narrowed it down, and they finally came up with, I think, 100. And they sent us a letter and told us what was going on. And you're one of them that we're taking a look at. I was fortunate that I had a deputy superintendent at the time who had worked in San Diego, and he knew some of the Gates people, so he was kind of our point person. Then it got down to 50. And they came out and talked to us, and they had us fill out a bunch of paperwork. And I'm starting to look into it a little bit and think, are we going to be a Gates school in this initiative? And then it got down to 20. And they came out and spent about a week with us. They spent a lot of time with me. What was I willing to do? What were we trying to accomplish? And then it got down to 10, and we were one of the 10, along with Atlanta, Memphis, Hillsborough County, Florida, Pittsburgh, Green Dot Charters in Los Angeles, Denver, Omaha, Dade County, Florida, Miami-Dade was selected as one of the 10, and Omaha was selected as one of the 10, and they dropped out immediately, so now it's 8. So, we started with, what can we do to transform Tulsa Public? And the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation said, we're going to decide on half of these schools, and we're going to reward them extensively with dollars and carrying out their work. The way we're going to pick the 4 out of those 8 is we're going to send you a consulting firm. We're going to have you work with them. We're going to have you figure out what you would do to transform your school. Many of you in the audience have heard of McKinsey Consulting. They sent McKinsey Consulting out. They spent 4 months with us. When it was all over, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation wrote McKinsey Consulting a check for $1 million for their help in consulting with us. We wrote an application for how you would transform, how you would reform an urban district. It was exactly 60 pages long. That became the blueprint for what we were going to do. And by the way, Senate Bill 2203, which was the race to the top application in Oklahoma, was patterned exactly after the Tulsa model. So what did we say in there? Well, we said, first of all, we're going to have a teacher effectiveness program. But then we soon found out that teacher effectiveness wasn't good enough. It was going to have to be a teacher leader effectiveness program, a TLE program. We must have, please make note of this, we must have great relationships with universities. It is an important ingredient if you're going to be a successful urban school, is that you have an effective relationship with universities. We have that with 2 or 3 of the universities that we worked with. We wrote a teacher evaluation. You have to have an effective teacher evaluation. We wrote the teacher evaluation in full cooperation and working together with our teachers union in Tulsa Public. Today, the Tulsa model, and if I ask, I can't see out there, but if I ask the superintendents for a show of hands who are in the audience, do you use the Tulsa model for your teacher evaluation? I suspect that every single one of them, you don't have to turn the lights up, I'm not going to ask the question. I would suspect that every single one of them would hold up their hands, because with the 500 and some schools, 20 or 15 in Oklahoma, well over 500 of them use the Tulsa model for their evaluation. It's a very complex model. It does consist of quantitative or how students are doing measures, but it's just not a straight up how did they do on a test score. Rather, it's a very complex formula that is utilized to get a value added measurement. So then along came, at about the same time that we were starting our work, along came Senate Bill 2203. And what did it call for? It called for a statewide teacher evaluation system that would contain both what the principal thought and measurement, qualitative and quantitative, increased testing in the state, more emphasis on testing, selecting schools that were in need, and in some cases threatening a takeover for schools that were in need, as though the State Department really could do any better than locally controlled schools. Common Core was introduced through Race to the Top legislation. We began working on implementing that, and I begin to think now about how we were organized in Tulsa Public Schools to really do our work. So we went through the first reorganization after I got there, and I have to just tell you something interesting. I reference Todd Lee as one of my stars whenever I got there. On the very first cabinet meeting that I ever walked into in Tulsa Public Schools, there were 23 people sitting in the room. And I will just tell you, not everybody was on the same page. And if you're going to be successful in whatever you do, you have to be organized for success, and you have to have team players. You have to. That is a lesson you will learn in life if you don't already know it. You have to have a great team. You have to be pulling for each other, and you have to be pulling for a common goal. We did not have that. Rather, we had a lot of strife. 5 years later, I walked into a retreat for an organization I now call executive staff, a group of people I call executive staff, and it equates pretty closely to that original cabinet meeting that I walked into. And I looked around the room, and there was one person who was there on the first cabinet meeting I walked in. Some left, like Todd Lee, for greener pastures, for something else they wanted to do. Talented people of their own accord. But there were a lot of people in Tulsa Public Schools who did not strive for that greater good, who did not understand the kind of teamwork and pulling together that it took in order to move a large organization forward successfully. So we went through the first of what is 3 reorganizations. I will tell you we're at about 2010 in my journey through Tulsa Public Schools. We did go through a very turbulent 4-year period. While I philosophically agreed with much of what the State Department of Education was doing, I would be remiss if I didn't point that out as an important component of my journey through Tulsa Public Schools, in that we had what turned out to be a very stormy time with the State Department of Education over issues like the A through F grading score that was used. And we had a lot of Fs in Tulsa Public Schools that were not F schools. Over the use in the Reading Sufficiency Act, which nobody believes it is more important than I, that third graders be able to read. But to say on a given day how they do on a given test that they will automatically fail, that is cruel. And that is not going to be effective. And we've done a lot of things in Tulsa to ensure that our third graders are reading on level. There was a promotion during this time on for-profit charters and a lot of reorganization in the State Department to promote that. But I have to mention that because that was a part of the journey. Now, in 2013, there were 2 events that happened in very close proximity that had a profound impact on my philosophy. Because as a longtime Oklahoma educator, I didn't think we were doing absolutely fabulous, but I thought we were doing okay. I mean, we did pretty well in Claremore. We did pretty well in Oologah. We had a lot of difficulty in Tulsa Public, but we were gaining on that. You're doing pretty well in Durant. But in 2013, I came to believe that as a nation, and in those very schools that I'm talking about, we really were not doing as well as we could. And that there was an impact that was going on with the economy of America, an adverse impact because our schools were not performing where they needed to be performing. And the first of those events, I was invited to the Harvard Business and Educator convening, 2 days on campus at Harvard. And there were only 4 superintendents who were invited. the superintendent from Los Angeles, superintendent from Denver, Hillsborough County, and Tulsa. Because by then, we had begun to attract a lot of attention for the work that we were doing in our teacher leader effectiveness department and in other areas that we were working on. There were actually 10 representatives from the Harvard Business School who were there. They ranged from very high-profile, well-known professors, including the dean of the Harvard Business College. There was an equally strong representation from the Harvard Graduate School of Education. There were over 20 very high-profile business and corporate leaders who came from extremely well-known, very high-profile businesses. The rest were attendees from various educational organizations. All told, I would say all totaled there were about 75 people who were at that two-day event. And here's what I learned, because the very first presentation was from a noted Harvard Business College professor, and he showed indisputably that America was falling behind in achievement. And I've already said this, I used to think, well, yeah, we're really doing okay, and if you disaggregate the data, you can see, and our economy's still strong, there is an adverse impact on education not being where it needs to be. Tests clearly measure American students against the world, indicate that America is lacking behind other developed countries in the world. The PISA test was quoted frequently. That's the Program for International Assessment of Students, and that was cited. I've already said the first presentation was a compelling presentation by a Harvard business professor. The increase of talent in America, they made their point. I listened, I understood, but then they actually finished on a strong point and said there are some good things that are going on in America, that we are increasing teacher talent in America, that universities are doing a better job of turning out teachers who are equipped to teach in today's environment. And I must weave that into my comments because I'm here on campus at the key institution of higher learning in this part of the state. And I have to emphasize that what I learned from the College of Business at Harvard and the College of Education can absolutely be applied here, of colleges working in concert and of this university ensuring that you are turning out teachers today who are equipped to teach how students can be successful in today's environment. And it's teaching how to analyze, and it's teaching how to think, and it's teaching how to organize, and it's teaching teamwork and all of those things, not rote memorization, filling out a bubble on a test. And that's where we're headed in Oklahoma. That's where we've been, and we need to come out of that dark age, and we need to apply to other areas so that we can get away from that. Now, they did cite that there is this increase of teacher talent in America. There are national organizations such as Teach for America, the New Teacher Project, New Teachers, New Leaders, the work that they're doing in Hillsborough County, in Denver, and yes, in Tulsa was cited. They talked about rigorous standards. And I have to just stop right here and tell you, we started with a TE initiative in Tulsa Public Schools. Today, we have a full department. In our last reorganization, we put in a TLE department, Teacher Leader Effectiveness, because you can't just have effective teachers if you don't have great leaders who understand culture and understand how to drive instruction. And our executive director of TLE is one of only 8 people who report to me in Tulsa Public Schools. So you have to have leaders, you have to have technology, you have to have great teachers, but the other component, and I really heard this emphasized again and again in 2013 in a couple of ways, are rigorous common standards. And we need to get that figured out in Oklahoma, because Common Core was written by the National Governors Association, and I understand as well as anyone what happened and why it happened and what the problems were. But if it's not going to be Common Core, it needs to be a curriculum that speaks to very well understood and very rigorous and common standards. Also out of the Harvard convening, on the good news side, we have better and new technologies for delivering instruction. We have better utilization of data. And that's a whole story in and of itself. School choice incentives. And I've gone from being adamantly opposed to charter schools to believing that public charters can provide programs in an urban setting that can be very beneficial. They can provide a more intense experience, longer days, longer years, in a deregulated environment, and in a district as big as we are. We needed to move to that. Now, the other event, and I brought this just to show you because I think everybody ought to read this, is a book by Amanda Ripley. Amanda Ripley was a Time magazine reporter whose mother was a teacher in Iowa, so she's certainly not an anti-public school person. And she was assigned to cover schools in America, and she took a look again at the PISA and cited the PISA and said, while America's doing okay, it's not skyrocketing like other schools are. And so what she did was she picked out 3 students from America that were in foreign exchange programs and followed them to three countries that had skyrocketed in educational improvement. And those 3 countries were Finland and Poland and Korea. And the 3 students she chose a young man from Pennsylvania, she chose a young man from Minnesota, and what makes this really compelling is she chose a girl from Sallisaw, Oklahoma, in a book that is a national bestseller that is read by so many people. And her takeaways from her study were that these schools that were skyrocketing had extremely high expectations. They had a very rigorous common curriculum across the country. They learned higher order thinking, specializing in reading and math. They did have rigorous tests at the end of instruction, but it was a well understood test, and it came at the end, and it wasn't used like the test that we are using in Oklahoma. But here's the key. They had extremely well-paid teachers. It's extremely difficult to get into a college of education in Finland. Extremely difficult. Some teachers have tried 2 or 3 times before they could get into it. So here were my takeaways from those 2 events in 2013. As a nation, we were falling behind, and it was having an impact on America, and we must do a better job in all of the nation's schools. There absolutely must be a highly trained, highly effective teacher in every classroom. The profession must be highly respected. Teachers must be well paid. That's a huge issue in Oklahoma right now. Today, we are short 41 teachers in Tulsa Public Schools. We're short 1,000 teachers across the state of Oklahoma, and we have another 500 teachers who are on emergency certification. I do believe that there has been the wrong emphasis on different financial incentives in the state of Oklahoma. I think a tax cut, and I'm not going to get real political, but I believe I need to say this, that a tax cut of $200 million at a time when we have a $600 million budget hole is not conducive to the state of Oklahoma, let alone, go ahead. Let alone to pay teachers what they're worth. Teachers must be highly trained, highly effective, they must have a say in decision making, and they must be highly paid. And there absolutely must be a rigorous and a standardized curriculum. So, my journey in Tulsa Public Schools comes to our 3rd reorganization. I'm not going to get deep into the details. There's no need to. If you want to know that, we're getting right now to where we're going to stop, and we're going to have a question and answer, and that's what I really look forward to. But we are reorganized. I only have 6 people who report to the superintendent. One of them is a deputy superintendent who has 9 people who report to her, and those 9 people all supervise principals. And what it's done is it's brought a uniformity to Tulsa Public Schools. Through our rigorous evaluation system and extensive training with principals and teachers in how to teach and how to evaluate, there have been a significant number of teachers who have exited Tulsa Public Schools. We are indeed in an entirely and completely different place than we were 7 years ago. And we talked about that there are so many other components to a healthy school. having technology, in addition to the other issues that I have talked about, having technology, having beautiful facilities, stressing extracurricular activities. We're only the 5th school in the United States of America to affiliate with the Any Given Child program, which is out of the Kennedy Center for Arts, where they come in and do an extensive assessment of your school and are you offering arts across the board. And we've started new art programs even in the face of withering financial difficulties. I mean, we lost $22 million in the second year that I was superintendent in Tulsa Public, and we still have not recovered from that. But we have had great support in Tulsa Public Schools. We went through Project Schoolhouse, which was an efficiency program. And by building relationships in the community and involving people and going out and listening to people, yes, we did close 14 schools. Not only has it made us more efficient, not only do we no longer have schools that are underutilized, under-enrolled, and we're not really thinking about what we're getting out of each school, but it sent a very strong message to the public that we were going to be businesslike on the business side of education. It helped us tremendously. Yes, we have passed 3 bond issues. 2010, $374 million. We had close to 75, 76% yes on that bond issue. 2013, $38 million bond issue for the infrastructure for all of our technology programs. And then on March 3rd of this year, to the tune of 85.5%, we passed a $415 million bond issue in Tulsa, the largest one ever in the history of the state of Oklahoma. And with that, we can do a lot of really marvelous things. I've already said we have exited hundreds of teachers. We have rigorous programs through our TLE department for entry into administration. We didn't even have a leadership program whenever I got to Tulsa Public Schools. Now we have a very well-developed leadership program. So while we're not where we need to be, and I say that primarily because we need to sort out the issues with testing in this state, and we need to have a simply understood testing program, and one that we utilize it for the purpose for which it was constructed. Personally, I favor the ACT. I think that shows if you're prepared for college. And I'll just say this before I open it up for questions. It's so fitting that we are talking about the importance of education and the number of college graduates that we have and the impact that it has on an area. We talk about Imagine Durant, and I will tell you that Southeastern Oklahoma State University in Durant, Oklahoma, has to be the centerpiece for everything that goes on, the centerpiece for economic development, and it is so inextricably tied to education. And I cannot stress enough how pleased I was to be asked to come down here and tell the story of Tulsa Public Schools. And I'm 2 months from my journey in Tulsa Public Schools ending. It's time for me to turn my attention to grandkids and to other areas. But if we can do it in Tulsa, we can do it anywhere. And this university can be the center for that energizing that happens in business and in education. I'm going to stop there and I'm going to turn it over for questions, President Burge.
We'll take some questions now, but I think the only thing that was wrong with your talk, I don't think you said the name of the book. It's called The Smartest Kids in the World by Amanda Ripley, if anybody's interested.
Thank you.
Questions? There's microphones up front here if you want to make your way down if you have any questions, please. To have somebody coming, please.
Yes, Dr. Ballard, I'm a product of excellent Oklahoma teachers. Unfortunately, I went to school in Kansas.
So did I.
But all the teachers went there so they could make a living, which is sad. Being a former school board participant and president, how do you move towards teachers of excellence? i.e., how do you help them on their path to success when they're not great at their craft, and how
Okay.
did you really improve the quality
Yeah.
of your teachers?
Yeah, I mean, that's really a great question, and it really starts with forming relationships with universities. That's exactly what we've done in Tulsa Public, is we've reached out to about 3 or 4 universities, and we've said, here's what we want our teachers to look like. So that's certainly applicable to right here at Southeastern. So it starts with that, and then it starts with bringing teachers in and understanding what they really do need. Now, what we've done in our latest reorganization, we actually have, with 2,800 teachers, we actually have 37 positions that we call instructional coaches. Now, there are some that would say, well, they ought to be in the classroom, but we truly believe the benefits of having these highly skilled, highly experienced teachers ready to go out into the classroom at a minute's notice. I hadn't been superintendent in Tulsa Public Schools for very long when one year over the holiday, over the winter holidays, I got an email from a teacher, and she talked about how difficult it was to adjust to teaching in the urban setting. And we had the remnants of what we now have today to support teachers. And she said, then I had a highly experienced teacher come visit my classroom. It was almost like, and I'll never forget her words, the cavalry riding over the hill. So that's what we have to do, is we have to have a very well-developed program to provide professional development for teachers. We have to have teachers coming in who have been well-trained. And in fact, our work in Tulsa has become so well-known that this year, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, who we still continue to work with extensively, gave us a $4.5 million grant to develop a structure to support the teachers in the classroom. And the other thing you have to do to ensure there's a highly effective teacher in every classroom is there must be a great leader in every building who understands teacher needs, who understand the importance of culture. I've said at times in my career, you can just measure culture in a building, and that will tell you a lot about how well students are going to do and if teachers are really satisfied with their work. Teachers will basically leave for 3 reasons. And the third will be salary. Eventually, that could move up, but the third will be salary. And the first one will be the order of the classroom, the discipline, and the support they get. And so we're on very shaky footing today because we have so few teachers that it's resulted in larger classrooms. And the second reason is feeling valued in their work. So those are the things we need to do to get highly effective teachers in, and those are the things that we need to do in order to retain them. And I've already spoken to this issue. We are woefully underpaying teachers in Oklahoma. It is an absolute travesty what we are doing, and we cannot listen to excuses anymore of budget shortfalls or anything else. We did it for highways in Oklahoma. I support that. I run into construction all the time because money was taken off the top. We have to value. We had 25,000 people at the Capitol 2 years ago, and we had between 7,000 and 10,000 who were there this year. And I spoke at both of those rallies, and I'm telling you, it is moving toward that. And everybody in this auditorium, everybody in this community, everybody in Tulsa and in Claremore must get behind a legislature and force change in that area. Okay, next question. Now, I like questions, and I would rather do question and answer. We went through that with the Administrative Council this morning, so I welcome anybody asking questions, please.
My name's Amanda. I'm a student of the John Massey School of Business, and I was just wondering, what advice do you wish someone had given you when you were a new educator?
I'm sorry, if someone could do what?
What advice do you wish that someone had given you when you were a new educator?
Okay, whenever I was, if I understood the question,
What advice do you wish somebody would have given you when you were a new educator?
a new educator. Okay, that was the part, whether it was an administrator or whether I was a teacher. That the important thing is to form good relationships. That's the advice I wish I would have heard first, and really it's the lesson that I learned pretty quickly. I started my teaching career in Coweta, Oklahoma. It was kind of a roundabout certification. The superintendent told me before he hired us that they had a lot of junior high kids who couldn't read. I had a double major in psychology and speech, and if I took 9 hours of reading, I could go help teach those kids how to read. I was very ill-equipped in the teaching of reading, And, I mean, this is a true story. First class I walked into, 44 kids in the class who couldn't read. Next class had 42. Nobody told me anything whenever I went into those classes. I found a couple of experienced teachers who helped me, but it would be about relationships. I was asked the question this morning, what leadership traits do I have that have helped to transform Tulsa Public Schools? And my answer was this, to all of the young people, to anybody out there in the workforce: know your strengths and know your weaknesses. Know your strengths and know your weaknesses. Play to your strengths and find ways to fill in for your weaknesses. I'm not a detailed person. I have surrounded myself with the most brilliant, detailed people, and I give them full credit for their marvelous work every single day. And we strive for the greater good. The direct answer to your question is that you need to form relationships in the workplace, form relationships with your students and with your peers. It's a good question, thank you. Who else?
Dr. Ballard.
Yes.
What key points did you do for your principals and those people? What's the key training you gave those to help them improve?
Key points for training of administrators. That, as I said, we didn't even have a leadership program. We start with aspiring principals, and we go through an extensive training program of what it would be like to lead in Tulsa Public Schools. We also have relationships with 3 universities who are providing master's degree programs in administration, and they know what we're looking for. So we hope that they're trained in the university classroom, and then when we get them, we start talking with them about the specific skills that they need. Do they know how to evaluate good teaching? That is at the top. We use videos. As I said a while ago, I could talk a lot about the details. I'm not going to go there, but I'm going to give you an overview of what we do. We establish a relationship with the university. We have specific training in how to evaluate teachers. We have specific training in culture surveys. The culture surveys, whenever I came to Tulsa Public Schools, were on the secretary's desk. And she would announce over the loudspeaker, by the way, the culture surveys are here on my desk, pick them up and have them in on Monday. Now, who's going to fill out a culture survey knowing that their identity would be revealed like that? That's not a good way to survey. Today, we have a very strong program with the University of Oklahoma with nationally known researchers. We go through an extensive process, and that's a part of their training. What do you do to have good culture? A lot of the training they go through is recognizing good instructional practices, how to talk to teachers, how to evaluate teachers. It's a program that has evolved over the last 5 or 6 years.
Hello. You spoke a bit about testing. How do you feel about the national opt-out movement, and do you feel that Oklahoma parents have the right to opt their students out of high-stakes testing?
Well, I do understand the national opt-out movement because I think that we are doing too much testing. And I believe even in Tulsa Public that we have been guilty of doing too much testing. You need assessment for a couple of reasons. One, you need assessment to inform your instructional practices. Now, being superintendent in a school district where 85, 86% of our kids come from backgrounds of poverty, and they come to school unprepared. They haven't heard the number of words that they need to hear, then they're coming to school behind. And so I believe that we need to use non-burdensome assessments to help drive our instruction. So that's a piece of it. I think we need to be very careful about the amount of testing that we are loading on kids today and the stakes that we are loading on testing. For example, high-stakes testing that speaks directly to whether or not a teacher will be retained. We do that. We do some of that, but it's a smaller percentage of the evaluation, and we strain it through a formula, a value-added formula. The state tried to do that, but they really did a very poor job at it. And we're the only one in the state who's doing that, and you need to do it carefully, and you need to do it with the work of the teachers and the teacher unions before you get into that. To answer the other part of your question, I think you just need something at the end of the year. I think you need something, and I don't think you need the stakes tied to it. You're going to fail 3rd grade, or you don't get a high school diploma. That's completely discounting the work that's going on in the classroom with certified, qualified teachers saying they completed the work and they need to graduate. But I'm not saying that you don't need some kind of assessment. So what I specifically favor is what our new state superintendent is proposing, and that is we go to the ACT Aspire, which will measure at different points along the way. We don't need to have kids sitting in front of computers, and we need to be more careful about the vendors that we choose and not have test, computers that are crashing when kids are on, question 49 out of 50. I believe that our testing program is in a real state of disarray. I think it's just been add-on, and we haven't really thought about what we need to be doing with testing. But I'm hopeful that we can get some of this straightened out. In fact, I don't even like to go to the Capitol anymore. But I got a call and they want me to go to the Capitol today. So instead of going home and seeing my grandkids, I'm going to drive to the Capitol. And we're going to talk about the Reading Sufficiency Act and what we should do with that program. I was proud of the legislature last year for overriding the governor's veto on RSA. Did I answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Dr. Ballard, you mentioned several times the importance of effectiveness or effective teachers in your school district. My question is, can you hear me? There we go. As being a junior here, getting ready to graduate, what do you look for in your freshly out of college teacher candidates for your school districts?
Okay, that's really a great question. And what we do is we have a lot of recruitment fairs where we bring students in. We do take a look at their academic background. Probably what we are looking for as much as anything will be qualities that we can find at recruitment fairs and through the interview process. We're looking for people who hopefully have been well trained in college, who know how to analyze, who know how to write, who know how to express themselves. We are absolutely looking for qualities of teammanship, of people who are going to be good teammates to other teachers and who will support each other. We are looking for people who understand the importance of relationships. We're looking for people who are good communicators. And I have to say this, I know there's not another question, so I hope I answered your question of what we're looking for, that as we have gone through this journey in Tulsa, communication and relationships has just been extremely important. We could not have made the changes that we did in the teacher evaluation system and in the work that we do with our principals if we did not communicate on a regular basis. So as the leader of the school system, I have several components of my communications process. I meet regularly with teacher designates from each building. In fact, I'll be doing that this week. We meet with principals. We have advisories into the faith-based community. We have advisories into our Hispanic community, which is a fast-growing population in overall community. We just have several very important means of communication, and I communicate on a regular basis too. So we are looking for employees in Tulsa Public Schools who understand that importance of communicating with parents and with students. So are we through with the questions, President Burge? Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ballard, for that very inspiring and informative lecture. We're so proud and honored that you came to be here with us here today. And to show our appreciation, I want to present you with this plaque for being distinguished lecturer in the John Massey Family Lectureship. Your name will also permanently appear on a plaque in the John Massey School of Business with the other 14 that have had this honor as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you all for joining us today. It's been a wonderful hour, and we'll hope to do it again soon. Thank you.